In this video, I want to showcase 5 different item interactions with different units. This will range from does it make sense to put a Statikk Shiv on Sona, and why exactly are attack speed items so terrible on Lucian. But before we get to that, I want to take a closer look at the item Guard Breaker. This item will provide you with a lot of stats and an amplifier for 3 seconds after damaging a shield. I already covered in the past that the burn effect from items like Morello or AoE damage from Hurricane have a positive interaction. The question I want to answer is how good is this item on Karthus? He is an executioner and you don't have that many crit items available to you, so you might find yourself in a spot where you want to give him something like a Shojin, a Jeweled Gauntlet and a Guard Breaker. The problem with Karthus is his rather long cast animation. What if he ends up activating the Guard Breaker, but by the time he finishes his channel, the effect is already over? Let's check out 2 different fights. In the first fight we have a Karthus 1-star with Guard Breaker as his only item and no executioner trait active. He auto-attacks the enemy Lilia that currently has a shield up, therefore he procs the Guard Breaker and then he starts his channel. The enemy Kai'Sa in the backline receives 222 damage. She has 36 magic resistance and therefore takes 26% reduced damage. Karthus is supposed to deal 242 damage before reduction, which means this number only makes sense if the damage was amplified by Guard Breaker. So if you proc the item on the last auto attack, then you have more than enough time to utilize the bonus damage. In our next fight, we are still running the same setup. The first Karthus ult hits the enemy Akali for 145 damage. He then proceeds to attack the enemy Mordekaiser, who has a shield from his ability. Our own Zac barely manages to break the shield before Karthus is full mana, so the last attacks won't renew the Guard Breaker effect. On the second cast, we can see that Akali receives 145 damage again, which means the effect ran out. Does this mean that you should never build this item? Not necessarily. The stats for an item build like Shojin, Jeweled and Guard Breaker still look pretty good, but you can run into some scenarios where his damage won't be amplified. For our second test, I want to investigate Vamok's armor in combination with Guardian. I don't know if this is just me not being a native speaker, but I think for some players the description of the Guardian trait can be a teensy tiny bit confusing. It says that the Guardians shield themselves and their closest ally for a % of their max health. The test I want to do is very simple. Is the shield based on only the Guardian's HP or is it based on each individual unit? In this setup we have a Pantheon with a Vamox and a Blitzcrank in the front line. When Pantheon drops low, he receives the full shield credit of 875. Thanks to Vamox, he has 1458 HP, and if we take 30% of that for each Guardian shield, then the numbers perfectly match up. So in short, if you were ever wondering about this, HP items like Vamox should always go onto Guardians. You cannot cheese a fight by putting a weak Guardian next to a super tank and then expect to receive a large shield. Next up, we have a question that does come up surprisingly often. Does Statikk Shiv work on Sona? I can definitely understand the confusion behind it, since Sona cannot auto-attack enemy units and simply gives out a buff to her allies with every attack. In this fight, we have an ethereal Sona with a Statikk Shiv. Since she deals no damage outside of her ability, all we have to do is check out the damage meter. We can see that every 3 attacks, she ends up dealing some magic damage. During the fight, you can also see the animation for Statikk Shiv on the board. So yes, you are free to slam this item without griefing yourself. If I'm not mistaken, then the confusion either came from this interaction not working on the PBE or simply the visual part of Statikk Shiv not showing properly, but as you can see, this has since been fixed. The next item interaction has to do with Gnar and especially his headliner mechanic. If Gnar is your headliner, then he will transform at the very start of the fight and jump towards the enemy board. In most cases, this is definitely what you want, since he receives a ton of bonus stats while also dashing out crazy amounts of damage. Since you expect Gnar to survive for a long time, it is a reasonable idea to give him a Titan's Resolve, since he will likely stack the item and make use of the bonus stats. The only problem here is that he doesn't utilize everything. Any bonus AP for Gnar will grant him bonus HP when he transforms, but this mechanic works like a snapshot. Any AP he receives after the transformation is completely wasted on him. If you put a Titan's Resolve on a headliner Gnar, then you need to accept the fact that all the bonus AP from this item will be completely worthless. It's not that big of a deal considering he gets a free Starak from Superfan and makes great use out of items like Deathblade, Infinity Edge and Bloodthirster. So Titans is usually not a high priority item for him anyways. The last item interaction I want to show you today has to do with Lucian. There is definitely the meme going around that Bard is the Jazz Legendary and Lucian is the tier 2 unit. I can definitely see where they're coming from. Lucian has been nothing but a disappointment to me. Something interesting that was discovered recently by the Chinese community might explain what exactly is wrong with this unit. His ability states that he will shoot 14 bullets plus 1 for every 20% bonus attack speed. However, if we actually count the number of shots in his fights, then you will always come out at 15, no matter how many attack speed items you give him. This means that the game does not grant him any bonus shots beyond the first one. I also wanted to check out his headliner effect because it is supposed to give him 3 bonus shots as well. If you count his shots fired in this fight, then you should arrive at a total of 18. This does make sense, at least with our current findings, because he has 14 as his base, 1 from attack speed and 3 from the headliner effect, so at least that part is working as intended. So does this mean you should always avoid items like Ginzo on Lucian because it doesn't make any difference for his ability? The answer to this is no. You shouldn't give him any items in the first place. Don't believe me? How about we close out this video with a small montage consisting of Lucian's greatest hits. I hope you learned something and see you next time.